Morning, everybody. Very nice to see everybody on this golden tonic morning. Golden tonic is a red tea. It's from Anhui Province. And so technically in China, remember, we hear about Dianhong, which means red tea from Yunnan. We hear about other types of hung, including here Qi Hung, which means it's from Chiman County, An Hung, which really refers to it's from from Anhui Province. And in this case, golden tonic is really sourced from the Yellow Mountains. And we get the original material and then actually have one of the production facilities in Chiman County go ahead and process it. So that's what we're going to talk about today. A shout out to anybody whose birthday it might be today and having a celebration today. Happy birthday. That's the important shop news. The other part of shop news is all of a sudden we're starting to be able to look forward. And the reason being is because we've finished up, as far as we know, year-end work and can really think about this first quarter, can think about a trip in April. This trip, by the way, wouldn't be to China. China currently is probably one of the most risky places to go to right now in terms of transmission of COVID and variants and hospital availability or lack thereof. So as a result, it's not a China trip, but very likely a Japan trip. So we'll give you more details as we get closer because we're working on all of this right now. Don't have every single detail in place. And also we have to be flexible because if actual conditions on the ground change, then we also have to change. But we are looking to be closed for the bulk of April. All right. So what type of a mood am I in today? I'm in more of a science mood today. I'm also in a mood at looking at the future. So by the end of today's session, you're going to know a little bit more about tea science related to tannins / polyphenols, related to theanine, and related to caffeine. So that's going to be one of the things you're going to have more information by the end of today's session. The second thing that you're going to have more information about is what the tea industry, particularly the red tea industry, is looking at for future advances in terms of producing red tea. This is a mixed bag, by the way, because how China looks at it is very different than how India or Sri Lanka or Kenya look at it. So let's go ahead and start with basics, which we've covered before, but I always like to start here. 6 basic steps to produce red tea. You got to pick it, you got to wither it, which means reduce the water content down to around 60% so that the leaves are flaccid, they can be rolled, they can be maneuvered, and they won't fall apart. After withering, you don't have to do anything. But what the option is, if you're mass producing, you can use a CTC method, which is crush, tear, and crumble. In other words, chop it up into tiny bits. We don't use that here. And usually the end result of that is a tea bag, or you have to roll it. Why is rolling important again? You have to break down the cells within the tea leaf to get the volatiles to release, to be exposed, and set up the situation. or set up the leaves to undergo oxidation. Oxidation is the next step. The second to the last step is drying, and usually that's done by baking because you want the moisture in the tea leaf to be around 3% at the end of the day so that they don't mold. And then lastly, you need to sort and package. So that's the basics. When you're in Chemung County and you're either producing prime grade, first grade, second grade, or third grade, you have about 5 or 6 additional very fine steps where every leaf is essentially handled. But in today's tea, it essentially stopped at those first 6 steps. So that's our basics for red tea. Now, I said I was going to talk a little bit about science of components. So everybody knows, and we've talked about this ad infinitum, about catechins in the tea leaves. So when you first pick, they're full of catechins, which are generally characterized as tea polyphenols. And what's different about green tea, which is unoxidized, versus red tea, which is heavily oxidized, 90 to 92% or so, is this process of breaking down the leaves and then exposing them to the air. So what does that do to the catechins? It reduces the catechins. In fact, it changes the components of the tea leaf by about 90%. Catechins being the main component. If you oxidize properly, you get a lot of theaflavins, a lot of theorubicins. And so in the oxidation process, you actually have a bell curve in terms of how you know where you are from a flavor perspective. So in the early oxidation process, if you stopped it after, say, hour and a half, the leaves would be grassy and still have a grassy smell and wouldn't have that deep red tea flavor and aroma that you're used to. If you stopped it way down the road, in other words, instead of getting that sweet spot, you exceeded that sweet spot by an hour or two, you'd have fewer theaflavins. You wouldn't have that sweet spot smell, which we'll talk about in a minute. And instead, you'd approach bitter. And you would approach, oh no, the S word. Don't go there. It's sour. So if you hit the sweet spot, you get fruity / floral, this wonderful bouquet that really good red teas, generally speaking, have. So that is this bell curve when you're oxidizing. So again, you're changing the polyphenol composition from catechins to theaflavins to theorubicins. Now, let's talk about where it grows before we go any further in the process. Because we're going to talk about, oh, wait a minute, before we go there, let's erase that previous thought for a minute. We're going to go to where it grows in a minute, and that's related to theanine. But we aren't at theanine yet. We're still at the polyphenols. And all of you are wondering, okay, we're at the polyphenols, we've got a lot of these catechins. Tell me what a catechin tastes like again. Oh, it's bitter. It's astringent more than bitter. I'm sorry, astringent. The catechins tend towards astringency. Once you get it into a theaflavin format, that astringency declines. Okay, so that's one thing. The second thing is caffeine. So caffeine, what does it taste like? It's bitter. So you got astringent with the polyphenols, bitter with the caffeine. All right. So this caffeine question comes up all the time. Why in the world, when I drink, say, tea from India or Sri Lanka, do I seem to get a bigger kick? Is it my imagination? Have we been brainwashed in some way such that actually caffeine changes by continent? You have not been brainwashed. It, in fact, does change by continent. So, as a rule of thumb, red tea in China, because of the varietals and the terroir, has from 2 to 4% caffeine. Well, let's go to India for a minute. What about Assam? Everybody's heard of Assam. What kind of caffeine profile does it have? It has from 3 to 5%. So actually, 2 compared to 3, let's see, let me do the math. Oh, that's 50% more. Ah, no wonder I feel a difference in caffeine. And oh, wait a minute. The higher you go up the chain in terms of quality, what are we talking about here? Prime, first, second, third grade, any of those grades, the higher you go up that ladder, typically the less caffeine. So in Assam, you don't really have that as the guiding principle. So you actually could get, say, a 2% caffeine in China and a 5% caffeine Assam. So you're talking scads of difference in caffeine. And that's why I think so many people early on had confusion and thought, oh, you're not telling me the truth. How can caffeine only be 40 to 45 milligrams? How can green tea have more? How can white tea have more? It's the varietal, it's the location, it's the terroir. Yes.
So this is a two-part question. One is, how long are red teas usually oxidized? And is that different between Anhui and Fujian?
So this is a two-part question. And the first question is, how long would I estimate that red teas are generally oxidized? Now, we're talking China here, right? And China has lots of craft farms. And the farms are smaller, so a lot of the tea is being done on the farms. So is there a rule of thumb that either the National Academy of Sciences puts out or the Tea Institute puts out? And the answer is no, because it varies by varietal and it also varies by season and terroir. So if you were to ask me to give you what I see in research as a recommended time, it would be somewhere between 3 hours and 4 hours. However, we've been to farms where they oxidize for 6 hours. We've been to farms where they oxidize as low as an hour and a half. So you see there's a whole huge range. And thank goodness for diversity. And I'll tell you why. Because if everybody did 3 hours, and by the way, this is part of what the future is going to look like. So this is a very apropos question, because really the scientists in India, Bangladesh, Kenya, Sri Lanka, they're all looking for that magic mean. They want the number. Give me the number, and then we'll program it into our machines, and all tea that we produce here will be very, very standard. So that's why this is a hard question to answer. Chinese scientists are also looking for, in quotes, the magic meat. However, they're not looking as hard as they are in other places because they realize from their experience from farm to farm to farm, hey, wait a minute, a rule that applies to all? I don't think so. And one of the things from a logical standpoint that we can all get our teeth into is, what if every single farmer used the same amount of time? What you would have is less variety in the flavor profiles. You'd still have variety because there's different terroirs. I understand that. There's different varietals. I understand that there'd still be some of that variety, but would you be getting the maximal flavor from that particular varietal or that particular terroir? And it's worse than that. When I describe the seasonality to it, you'll see in a minute why it's much worse than that. Now, the second part of this question, the difference between Anhui and Fujian oxidation times, even more complicated. And it should be, because locations are different, aren't they? Seasons, well, everybody has spring, but how spring behaves by location is different. And in a minute, we're going to see why that's a huge, important factor. In Yunnan, if you go to the Southwest, vastly different because you have subtropical areas there. So oxidation, you're looking for a number. And yes, I can give you averages. In Anhui, the average will probably be closer to the 3 or 4 hours. The Fujian average will probably be closer to a 2 to 2.5 hours. So there is some difference. However, you're asking as if it's a rule, and it's not. It's a rule per farmer. They're using this important scientific instrument to determine where they're going to go. Yes.
In Sri Lanka, are they using Camellia sinensis assamica or sinensis, or CS sinensis is what that
Okay.
has been asked.
Love this question and I hate this question at the same time. And let's talk about why I love the question, because you're paying attention to details. Love the fact that you're paying attention to details. I hate this question because the British messed this one up as well. And they messed it up because they believed that in India, though that varietal was actually a different species, when in fact it's not. It's all of them should have been classified as Camellia sinensis sinensis. Now, in other countries, you do have a few other species. So that is going on. And even in China, you have 24, 25, 26 different species. But no matter if it's called Camellia sinensis sinensis or Camellia sinensis assamica, it's the same darn thing. The issue was the mistake got codified. And as soon as you codify, just like in the West, oh yes, I'm going to have some black tea. Oh, are you really? What type of black tea? A fermented black tea or a heavily oxidized black tea? Do you mean a black tea that the Chinese call red? Or do you mean a black tea that the Chinese call black? So it became, the mistake became codified. And that's what's happened with this issue as well. All right, so we're talking about, oh, and we're talking a lot. So let's see, yes, we are talking a lot. You know what, I can talk while we continue to get ready and see the demonstration, and then you brew along. So it is my great pleasure to stop talking and to bring the thirsty tea master so she can demonstrate golden top.
Golden Tonic. It's the Anhui red. Hey, good morning. 你好，早上好。My name is Sophie. So we do 红茶. This is red. Okay, so it's my space. So I like it do the red, so I follow, the Fujian area called 红茶is 功夫红茶. This is section. So yeah, if you like it, the copy, the copy us. I use the 3 glass, Oh, I also in Fujian, same thing. 3 this. Okay, John.
So you have options. Your setup doesn't have to have the 3rd glass. That's okay. You don't have to have tea toys. It won't be as much fun. But you do have to have 2 glasses and a strainer. These things are de rigueur. You must have these things. What she's going to do first is make sure that everything is really, really clean. Going to heat the cup. And when you heat the cup, you can use 200-degree water, you can use 175, doesn't matter. You're going to preheat, if you can, your water to 175, but if you can't, then use a meat thermometer or some other method to get to the right temperature. So you notice that she makes sure all the cups are really, really clean. All right, and then she's going to draw the 175-degree water. And as always, she's going to dissipate the steam because you don't have to do this, but it encourages whatever brightness there is in the tea to be accentuated. And she is making sure that she is dissipating the steam a little bit. 3 cups makes it easier, not easier, but faster to do this. All right. And she's getting her bag marked number 3 golden tonic. She's getting ready to put it in the heated glass.
One more time on, so follow me. I know still hot, so it's the heated, yeah. So perfect right now. So take your time. Yeah, gentle, slowly. Yeah, I'm shaking. So shaking that, so if you like this called 摇香, it's called 摇香. Yeah, 摇香, you need it fast. Yeah. So also, smell. This one very important now. So look at me. Gentle, slowly, some ocean.
So you notice each of the motions is deliberate.
A little bit heating. Beautiful, right? Yeah.
And you set the timer.
So 2 minutes.
Yeah,
2 minutes.
for 2 minutes. She was testing whether you paid attention to the
Sorry.
email we sent. All right, and yes, it is. And there's lots of things to note when looking at this tea. Tea leaves themselves, but also the tea liquor. All right, we were talking, yes.
Oh, a comment already on the leaves about them being flat, uniform, green tweed leaves.
Flat.
In the
Oh, I'm sorry.
back, sorry, but they're in the back, so the dry leaves.
Dry leaves, green tweed leaves. I kind of like that description. Flat and uniform. I love that part of the description. That means when they got to the packing section, they actually handled this leaf by leaf. Yes.
She also noticed that the dry leaves have this grassy aroma.
Okay, so the dry leaves, this particular participant calls it a grassy or aroma. And so this is good because you'll contrast it with the heated leaves, and then you'll contrast it with the wet leaves. All right, so let's go back to, we were talking about tannins. We graduated to caffeine and the differences, and I talked about seasonality. But you know what? Let's not talk about seasonality yet. Let's talk about L-theanine. So L-theanine, generally speaking, has an umami sweet taste. All right, so again, remembering polyphenols, astringent. Caffeine, bitter. L-theanine, umami sweet. So where is L-theanine created in the plant? It's created in the root. And from the root, it travels to the leaf. Now, when it travels to the leaf, what influences the changing of L-theanine? And I told you this is going to be a little scientific, but this will be the worst of the science. So don't worry, if you capture this, then I don't think I'm going to say much more scientific. By the way, timer went off. Tea master is separating the tea liquor from the tea leaves. Careful, thorough, putting the leaves back in the cup. Okay, so let's take a look at this thing. Wow, this has color. This has real color. Does this look like in the sun? Not really, but it does have more oomph to it in terms of color than, say, Golden Burst, which we did on the first red of this series. So let's catch an initial aroma. We're entering the quality arena. And we're going to take a 175-degree sip. And what we're going to try and do is think about astringency. Where is it in the mouth? We're going to think about, is it smooth? Is it heavy? Is it mellow? We're going to think about how it goes down, whether there is a, and I'm really talking about the aftertaste. Is there coolness in the aftertaste? Is there something else occurring in the aftertaste? And then we'll hit energetics. So that's, I will go ahead and enter the quality. And we're using tea rhythm. We're not in a hurry. We'd rather nail it than be in a hurry, because tea has its own rhythm and we have to respect it. So I've taken my initial sip. I have an impression about astringency. I have an impression about where it is. I also have an impression about the body. I'm getting a little bit of the aftertaste. I don't have energetics yet, so let me take another sip. Okay, I've got a pretty strong impression about this tea. So it's really now your turn to go through this process. So the tea master, is going to go ahead and brew with you. And while she's setting up, I'll talk a little bit more about L-theanine. So remembering that L-theanine migrates to the leaves and it changes into other compounds depending on heat. So heat can make it change faster. So you have a decrease in L-theanine. Hence, during summer teas in general are going to have more astringency, more bitterness, and less possibility of sweetness. So, and that's one of the reasons, because it's hotter. The other thing is terroir. If you plant high in the mountains, what's the characteristic of high in the mountains? Oh, fall. Yes, we love fall. So the other trigger of conversion for L-theanine is sunlight. So you have less sunlight in the high producing tea areas where the best of the tea is produced in China. And so that means there's more L-theanine retained in the leaf. And more L-theanine retained in the leaf means at the end of the day, it's going to be sweeter what the end result is if the processor is any good. Now, if I'm processing, who knows what the results will be. But a professional processor would do a good job with that. And they'd have the material to actually do that good job. And that's why we've talked about details matter. And actually, I'm disturbing your process here. So I'll get back to that in a minute. So you notice that you're making sure that your tools are completely clean, that the water temperature is cooler. It's not so much that the water temperature is cooler, it's that the steam is dissipated a bit. And you notice there's no need to be in a hurry with this. And in fact, the more you are rhythmic with it, the better the end result's going to be. Tea Master has opened bag number 3 and deposits it in the glass, shakes the glass. Make sure that the heat is evenly distributed with the tea leaves. Dissipates the heat one more time. And you notice she doesn't cover. You know, I forget to tell people, especially newcomers sometimes, because it's only in retrospect when I hear how they grew and I hear, oh, it doesn't taste the same. And so then we go through the process. Well, describe to me what you do. And so many of them cover. Cover is wrong. You will flatten the flavor. You set your 2-minute timer. And in your receptacle cup, you have hot water. We're ready to go. So we're talking about L-theanine as one of the 3 main components. So polyphenols being one, caffeine being the other, and L-theanine being the third. Now, we've talked about oxidation transferring or changing the catechins into theaflavins. And if you oxidize long enough, those theaflavins then turn into theorubicins. The theaflavins makes the flavor of red tea brisk. It also lends that amber color to the red tea. So these elements, to break it down very simply, are the main ones that are easy to focus on. Are there other elements? Of course there are, the volatiles. But you know, we have 650, 750, 850 volatiles. So to talk about volatiles in great detail is probably not so useful for you. But to talk about these three other elements, it's very useful because you can think about those and relate those to location, season, varietal, and methodology of processing. All of these things are very graspable, and every tea purveyor should have some sense of this, because if they don't have a sense of this, then how can they tell you why a tea is a certain way? And how, when you describe to them what you want, how can they reliably get you to what you want? All right, timer has gone off. Tea master and you are separating the tea liquor from the tea leaves. Okay. And now you're going to enter the quality arena. So your tea should look this color. You smell this, and then you're going to take that initial 175-degree sip. And you're going to be thinking about where there's astringency, remembering everybody's going to have it in different locations. You're going to be thinking about weight of the tea itself in your mouth. You're going to be thinking about what, if any, aftertaste there is. And by the way, remember, as I go through these categories, some of you are going to be thinking, hey, how come I'm not getting aftertaste? Don't worry about it. Remember, we're all put together differently. So our reaction should be different to a degree. Yes?
The warm leaves have a sweet stone fruit aroma.
Sweet stone fruit aroma of warm leaves. Love that description.
Another participant says she's surprised not to detect the aroma from the wet leaves nor the liquor, but the first slurps that she's had are very juicy with an immediate warming to the core, tiny astringency on the lips.
Tiny astringency on the lips for this particular participant, juicy, warming to the core. So already we have energetics, and let's go to that juicy for a minute, because actually in China, they would really agree with you about this particular tea. It has that sense of quick drinkability. So let's talk about juicy in even more detail. When you think juicy, what does that imply? That implies easy to consume. And usually for the juicy teas, drunk very quickly. Yes.
Another participant says the heated dry leaves smelled vegetal and had a sharp aroma for her that reminded her of wet pine leaves.
Oh, you know, I kind of like this comment. And this particular participant is talking about the wet leaves. So there's nothing subtle in the wet leaves for this participant, to the point that they almost have a sharp, piney smell and deeply vegetal.
She also got two more impressions off the wet leaves, which were, scroll up. One was an immediate strong honey scent and also a florality to it.
Immediate strong honey scent, and this is in the wet leaves, and a florality. So this participant has taken apart these leaves in an interesting way, because there's this participant draws a contrast between that vegetalness, the initial vegetalness of this, grafting over towards a pininess. And I love the fact that you went piney, even though I wouldn't have used that term. I completely understand it because you're emphasizing the tremendous outpouring of volatiles from the leaves, and then to florality and I believe honeyness.
Yes. And there was a continuum for her in her process and quality arena. From the pininess was with the heated dry leaves, which have that sharp aroma, which I don't think I made clear.
Okay.
And then she transitioned into considering the wet leaves, which gave that strong honey scent, florality. And then her next comment, which I hadn't shared yet, which is the first sip still had a strong honey taste and huge juiciness.
So this go from, and I'll correct the one thing that I didn't quite catch correctly. Once this participant got to that first sip, huge honeyness, huge floralness. Okay, huge floralness. And so actually for this participant, she provided a whole continuum. The dry leaves with a pininess, which, you know, right away said, oh, we're going to have something happening here. The wet leaves with the vegetalness, and then followed by floral and honey, which was that invitation to take a drink. And the drink actually juicy, honey, and floral. So this tea, when you think about what you're telling me, is, you know what? This tea has a lot going on with it, and it's not deceptive. It is consistent all the way through. Love the comment.
Another participant says that for her, this tea is sweeter than the last couple of reds that we tried.
Oh,
Loves it.
this is interesting. I really like this comment too, because this participant has said, wait a minute, didn't you tell us to take good notes and to compare from session to session? So this participant compared to Golden Burst and Culmination and said, hey, this one is sweeter. This one has more of that red tea sweetness, which the other two didn't have as much of.
Another participant says she's getting a soft, full mouth with a light astringency.
Soft, full mouthfeel with a light astringency. So we're beginning to build consistency here. We aren't hearing heavy, overwhelming, mouth-filling astringency. No, it's either on the lips or it's light. So this tells you also something about the skill level that this particular farmer used, because they didn't allow, so they didn't under oxidize this, because if they had under oxidized this, you all would have been saying, yeah, real astringency. They didn't over oxidize because all of you are saying, oh, honey, sweetness, floral. And remember, floral and fruity are interchangeable. So they're in that sweet spot. And so you all now have an ability as you go anywhere, whether it's this shop or any shop, as you enter the quality arena and think of these things, to know why they're occurring and to work backwards and say, ah, this is the reason that they're occurring, and this is what I like. And then you ask the tea purveyor, do you have any others that are oxidized in that sweet spot? See what you get.
Another participant says she's getting a light, smooth, balanced taste.
Light, smooth, balanced taste. So again, nobody is saying that, oh, this thing is smacking me like a truck. It's light, smooth, and balanced. We haven't heard any exceptions. The only time heavy has been used so far was as a modifier to honeyness.
Another participant says he concurs with other tasters, but he seems to be caught up in a corner of this tea that has a malt in the scent and some in the taste. And then the aftertaste leaves a smooth feel on it.
Love this comment. I was wondering why I wasn't getting this before, because for me, if you had asked me, what does it lead with? I would have said a maltiness. And so I appreciate the fact that this commentator is in that same corner that I am, getting the maltiness. And by the way, are any of you wrong not to have picked that up? The answer is no. And this commentator was really smart, because the commentator said it's a corner of the tea. There's lots going on in the tea. One of you said it's balanced. There's a balance between everything going on. And so we're reacting to the things that we like in a tea, and we're moving forward with those. And so this is why this is a great comment, because all of you are making great comments, because you're picking up those things that right away ring a bell. Oh, I love honey in my tea. Oh, this is great. Oh, I love floral. Me, I love fruity. And now, I love malty. Great catch.
Another participant says the tea is very drinkable, and then asks, pardon me while and then asks how this would compare to honey merlot, one of the other reds in the shop.
So the participant says, as a comment, very drinkable. Absolutely agree. And all of you have agreed, balanced, smooth, very light, astringency, juicy, all synonyms for very drinkable. And then this participant asked a question, of which there was one word that was left out. So the question was, how would this compare to honey merlot, which was formerly in the shop? We're sold out of honey merlot. So that's the one word that was left out. Honey merlot, from our perspective, led with even more sweetness and even more sense of smoothness. So it's hard to get more smooth than this, isn't it? But honey merlot managed, through its balanced flavors, from our perspective, to have even more smoothness. Another aspect of honey merlot, which is different from this, first of all, from a different location, although it was still Anhui, and it was a tree. So it was an ancient tree, but it was old tree, which meant that you had that aspect of the plant working as a calming mechanism, and then making you believe, oh, this is even smoother because I'm calm as well. So great question. And that is the way to understand these two teas. Yes.
Another participant says the leaves in the cup after brewing continue to smell delicious. Wishes she could keep this scent in her house all the time.
The leaves in the cup, even after brewing, continue to have this great aroma, delicious aroma. And this participant wishes that this could be the aroma of her house. Now, I'm going to tell you how this can be the aroma of your house. If you drink enough of this, you can dry the leaves and then put the leaves out just as we do here. And eventually they'll absorb the other aromas and leave a wafting of this aroma. Okay. So we were talking about this combination of tannins and their conversion and that effect on flavor. We talked about seasonality, why summer teas are going to be much more astringent. We talked about L-theanine and the trickiness of understanding L-theanine. You can't just say, oh yes, there's going to be X% of L-theanine. You don't know that. And the reason you don't know it is because it depends on what the weather was this year. It depends on what part of the season they picked it. And the differences can be huge. There can be 50, 60% difference. And that's what makes especially the craft teas in China, so complicated. And that's why careful analysis is really, really important. All right, I said I was going to give you a preview, and I am, because I have time to do it, of what is the tea world thinking about from a processing modality moving forward? What would the tea world like to do? And so let me lead with China first. They might like to do a lot of things in China, but they're limited. Why are they limited? They don't have many huge plantations. They have a few, but they're not dealing with plantation tea the way India, Kenya, Sri Lanka, and some of these other countries are. So most of these ways of thinking relate to plantation tea, not so much craft tea. Now, the Chinese, there is a tendency now to think about the possibility of consolidating farms, but you can think about that all you want. It's hard to do. It's really hard to do because are you gonna wipe out all your small producers and force everybody to become an industrial tea purveyor? Well, there's two reasons that you're not gonna do that. The first off is leaders love their craft teas, and they know you can't get these craft teas in a plantation form. You know, we just talked about seasonality. We just talked about position on the mountain. You can't have a plantation on the mountain. And even if you could, what size would that mountain be? I'm sorry, what size would the plant be? Who the heck cares what size the mountain is? It's what size would the plantation be? So the point being is that there's this, not only is there a cultural resistance to doing this consolidation, although economically it might make sense from a world market, it doesn't make sense from the Chinese tea market. The Chinese tea market loves its craft teas. By the way, Sophie's customers would be up in arms if they consolidated, because we love our craft teas here as well. All right. So again, let's go to these other countries. So what are they thinking? So you know that they have machine pickers, or machines that do picking. That's how I really should say it. Are those very good? They're great if you want tea bag tea. They're horrible if you want craft tea. No machine currently available can pick in a craft manner. But they're now working on machines that can do two things. By looking at the texture of the leaf, they have sensors which can detect what are healthy leaves. So that's one of the things. And they also have sensors which look at the stems to see where they should cut. Now, is this type of machine actually in action? No, this is, they're in laboratories, they're working on this. They would love to reduce the human component because that's an economic benefit to large plantations. So that's one thing they're working on. What about processing? So we're staying in the red tea right now. Withering, usually wither in a trough, blow air through, they're trying to reduce temperature. Hey, ought to be able to do sensors, which, did I say trying to reduce temperature? I did. And all of you raised your eyebrows and said that's not true. And you're right, it's not true. As I reran that through my head, they're trying to reduce the water content. Okay, now we're on the same page. So might there be sensors which could measure water content? There are. The only issue is, if you're a craft farmer, what highly advanced and technical machinery are you using? You're using this. And so far, even though they have electronic noses, when the Chinese look at this, they understand what's trying to be achieved, but right now, they are not buying. They're experimenting, but they're not buying. Because craft tea needs to be handled in a certain way in terms of withering. And there need to be judgments. And we've talked about already why there need to be judgments depending where in the mountain, what season, what time of the season, all of these things make a difference. You might argue they don't make a difference in terms of being able to say, hey, this is 60% water. You're exactly right. But I ask you this, are all these farmers uniformly getting it down to 60%? And the answer is absolutely not. They are getting to some percentage, but it's not a precise percentage. So that's one of the issues with that. Yes.
Question about the picture, actually, one of the pictures you sent. This one is curious about the choice of paintings in the pictures that were sent
great.
out.
I'm glad you asked this. Okay, this great question. I'm sorry I didn't explain this right in the beginning. So where in the world did those pictures come from? They came from a museum in Chemung County. So we walked through the museum, took these pictures, and they show China in the late 1800s in various small places where they're doing tea. So that's why those pictures are there. We just thought it was an interest. It's in Anhui Province. We thought that that would be interesting to share with you. Yes.
What is the vintage of this tea that we've tasted today, and any suggested food pairings?
So this tea is from, let me think about this a moment, 2018 or 19. I can't remember exactly which year, probably 18. And again, given the strength of this tea, you have many more options in terms of food pairings. Because with something like this, you're not afraid of something that's a little bit sweeter. This would be an after meal. This is a great afternoon tea. I wouldn't do this after dinner because even as we just went through that explanation of differences in caffeine, there is something going on with red tea that affects people and makes it hard for them to go to sleep. So do your guests a favor. Don't take a chance with red tea very much after the dinner hour and make this an afternoon tea. Cookies are great with this. Fruit is actually quite great with this. Fruit is really good with this. And lightly salted crackers would be wonderful with this. So that's how I would handle this. I wouldn't put this in the meal proper. I'd put this postprandial. All right, so wow, we're good. All I haven't done is talk about what they're thinking about in terms of advancements in oxidation. So in terms of oxidation, what they're thinking about, again, is a way to measure precisely what chemical constituents are what. Let me restate that in a way that's real plain. In other words, what are the percentages of theaflavins? What are the percentages of theorubicins? And making a rule that when you get to this percentage, you can stop because the sweet spot for theaflavins for some teas is this. The only problem with this, and they're not able to do this yet, the only real problem with this is the varietals. It's different by varietal. So I ask you in India, Sri Lanka, Bangladesh, other large producing outside of China, what is it that they're doing with tea leaves? When they bring them in, they're bringing them in from all over. They're even mixing varietals. So this is a really hard thing to do unless you don't care. Now, you might not care if you're a big plantation owner because you just want approximate, because all you're interested in, because you're selling by the ton, Your tea drinkers are putting spices or other things in the tea. It's tea bag, so that's why you don't care and you only want an approximation. This would never currently work for China, although China is looking at everything and their research institutes are actually looking at these questions, but they're doing it on a finer basis. In other words, they're looking by varietal and they're wondering, might there be a way to do some of this? All right. Loved going through the red teas with you and love covering this set of topics with you. What's on deck? So the next tea session, for those of you who love green tea or raw black, this next set of teas is going to be tremendous. So we're going to cover intensity next week. That's a raw black. Then, if my memory serves me right, the next tea is going to be a brand new green tea called Debonair. And then the last tea is going to be a brand new green tea. And I believe, I've forgotten which one it is. I think it's Swanky, but don't hold me to that. But I know it's a brand new green tea. Love going through the red teas with you. Your comments are so on the money. All of you, I feel, it would be appropriate for you all to open tea shops. Now, I'm not encouraging that, but this is what you're bringing to the table. And the fact that you're not afraid to say these things and that you're putting them out there and that you're doing it so expertly is a tribute to you. You are really absorbing, and it's a great challenge to us because what that forces us to do is to keep pushing the envelope and presenting more and more information and more types of categorizations, which can be helpful to you. Your responsibility this week hasn't changed. You need to remain healthy. As the weather changes, get out there and take advantage of it. We really look forward to seeing everybody next week. Bye-bye now.
Take care, everybody. Bye.